Hello, my name is Christopher Renstrom. I'm the creator of rulingplanets.com and Christopher Renstrom Astrology. And this week, I wanted to talk to you about the lunar eclipse that will be taking place in the zodiac sign of Virgo on March 14th. Eclipses are very dramatic events in astrology. In fact, over the 2,500 plus year period that astrology has been around in the West, eclipses are still as dramatic as they were when they first began being recorded in Sumer. There are two types of eclipses in astrology. There are solar eclipses and lunar eclipses. A solar eclipse is when the moon comes between the Earth and the sun, and it blocks the light of the sun in the sky. These are particularly dramatic when they take place during the daytime, because suddenly the light disappears and the temperature suddenly drops and things get very cold and very chilly. Things get very eerie and things get very silent. A lunar eclipse is when the Earth comes between the sun and the moon and casts its shadow over the full moon at night. And that's when the moon begins to turn a very strong red or maybe even a rust color before it eventually disappears from view. The reason why these were regarded as being so dramatic, as kind of being earth-shaking back in the day, is because this is when the lights disappeared from the heavens. The sun disappeared from the daytime, and the full moon disappeared from the nighttime. And in ancient civilizations, they weren't always sure that these lights were going to return again. This was always very dramatic, and it was always very earth-shaking, and it was regarded as a crisis because the governing bodies were being removed from view. The governing bodies were being removed from their proper place in the heavens. Now, over the centuries that astrologers have been recording the comings and goings of solar and lunar eclipses, there's been quite a body of literature that's been collected, quite a body of predictions, you might say. During a solar eclipse, it was said that that would be simultaneous with the removal of a public figure from office. Either this public figure was overthrown in war, or they passed away, or they might have been removed during some sort of rebellion or suddenly fallen ill. So solar eclipses were pretty much associated with the removal of public figures from their high positions. Lunar eclipses were always associated with things that befell the body and the body politic. Now, because the body politic were basically the citizens of a state or the citizens of a nation, things that might befall might be things along the lines of pestilence, famine, natural disaster, or losses of livestock, disasters that would upset the people and in turn upset the government. Now, on March 14th, the lunar eclipse will be taking place in the zodiac sign of Virgo. So we would look for things that are associated with Virgo to be impacted or affected. Well, what does Virgo rule over? Virgo rules over women and women's societies and women's bodies. So that might be something that might be impacted. Virgo is also the zodiac sign of work and service. Virgo is the zodiac sign of health. And Virgo, because of its association with Demeter, or with Ceres as she was known in Roman civilization, Virgo has a very strong and powerful association with the plebs, the plebeians, as they were called back in the day. Now, the plebeians, or the plebs, which was a quicker way of referring to them, always referenced the common folk. These were the workers in society. So back in Rome, these were essentially laborers, or they were farmers. Basically, they worked in the area of agriculture, supplying the food for the Roman people. And in Roman mythology, Ceres, goddess of the grain, was associated with agriculture. And so therefore, Ceres, goddess of the grain, became the patron goddess of plebeians, the patron goddess of the common folk. She essentially protected the common folk. Now, what's interesting about this is that Mercury rules two zodiac signs in astrology. Mercury rules over Gemini and Mercury rules over Virgo. And these are signs that deal with our day-to-day life, our activities in our day-to-day life. Gemini and Virgo rule over these areas of our life. Mercury, with its rulership over Gemini, talks about the way that we live and learn, that's Gemini, and Virgo talks about the way that we work and we produce. So when eclipses mean lights out in heaven, That means that things are going to be impacted in a way that's not recognized or seen right away. When we look a little bit more closely at this lunar eclipse, which is taking place on March 14th, we see that the full moon will be trining the planet Uranus and sextiling the sun. This is actually a good thing. Uranus is the planet of revolution and change in astrology. You can almost think of it as the wheel of fortune. Whenever it impacts a chart, it upsets the way that things are typically or usually done. What's on top of a wheel soon moves to the bottom part of the wheel, and what's on the bottom of the wheel may come rising to the top. So there's a kind of unpredictable and inconstancy to the idea of Uranus. When it impacts, it's regarded as a wild card, as a radical element that's been suddenly thrown into the mix. So one is always sort of on guard or cautious whenever Uranus pops up by aspect to the planets that are taking place, particularly in an eclipse. So Uranus, which can be potentially calamitous if it is in difficult aspect, actually happens to be forming benevolent aspects to the sun and moon. So you can think of this sextile and this trine as a safety net, that the energy of Uranus is going to basically behave itself, and it's going to be supporting both the sun and the moon during this particular period. Now, as I said, an eclipse is lights out in heaven. We're all suddenly plunged into the dark during an eclipse. We may not recognize this safety net, but what we need to do is trust that the safety net is there, that Uranus is working with both planets involved in the eclipse to bring about, hopefully, constructive and positive results. Now, if you're born under Aries, or you have Aries rising, you may feel like your workaday life just isn't doing it for you anymore. You can't help but feel like you're wearing blinders when it comes to looking at the future, when it comes to understanding or seeing where things are going. And indeed, a busy schedule can create a feeling that you're getting things done while masking over the fear that you're just running in place. All of us want to get somewhere with what we do for a living, whether that's getting results for the work that we do, or producing, or getting more money, or a better place in life, things along those lines. But there can happen at different times, and it's going on particularly with this lunar eclipse, in which your vision of yourself, your vision of your career, or where you're going, isn't on the same page as your workaday world, as what's going on with you at work. And so the question arises, is your job supporting you in who you are? Or is it the thing that you're doing just because you can't think of anything else to do? Now, that can be a bit of a tough question. We have responsibilities, we have obligations, we have bills that we need to pay. And so what's going to happen in the weeks following this lunar eclipse is that life at work is going to get even more demanding. Maybe there's a shortage in staff. Maybe all of a sudden there's an enormous workload that's come your way. Or maybe there's someone that you work with or for who's left, and you're kind of tapped to be that person's replacement. So you can expect things to get much heavier at work and demands to increase. Now, if you love what you do for a living, or you're inspired by what you do for a living, you may simply say, okay, this is a setback. This is something that I have to put up with. This is something that I have to work through, and things will end up, turning out for the best in the end. But what if you're not really into what you do for a living? What if the job that you work at right now is just doesn't do it for you? It just doesn't stimulate you or inspire you in the way that you want to be inspired. Well, this lunar eclipse could provide the impetus for you to go and look for something more fulfilling. Now, that might sound very frightening at first, but sometimes those obligations that we have, those deadlines that we have to hit, those bills that we have to pay, can narrow our vision of what we want to do for a living. And it takes something like an upset in what we're doing for a living. It takes an upset at work or something in which it's just become so impossible to get us to sort of take off those blinders and to go and look for something else. During this period of time, when things are sort of thrown in the dark and when you realize that you don't want to be working at this position, you may find that the blinders are being removed, that you've just can't take it anymore. You've had all that you can take. And ironically, what can happen is that this can free you up to look around for different situations that you wouldn't have looked for before because you were working so hard. And you may recognize in the weeks to come that not only is there another job available for you, but it may actually be a job that you like. If you're born under Taurus or you have Taurus rising, the questions that might arise during the lunar eclipse taking place on March 14th is, what happened to my love life? What happened to my creativity? What happened to my joy? There can be this feeling with the shadow of the moon being cast across your life that you're making all of these sacrifices while getting nothing in return. Now, during this period of time, when the moon in Virgo disappears from view in the nighttime sky, it's going to be the sun in Pisces that's going to have the stronger influence. And you might suddenly be flooded with all of these what if scenarios. What if I change this? What if I change that? How do I get out of this sort of situation? You might also be filled with all of this longing for something new, longing for something different, this feeling that you got on a bus headed in the wrong direction, and how do you get things back on track? So with this Pisces energy, which may be flooding your horoscope, you may be asking, what happened to all of these things? And you might be looking at your life and your obligations and responsibilities, things that are always associated with Virgo. And you might be asking yourself, why am I doing this? Why am I working so hard when I'm not really getting anything out of it? This can be rather existential for a Taurus. You can feel pulled in different directions by these different feelings. But this is when you need to sort of really connect to the Virgo moon. At the end of the day, you were born under an earth sign. Taurus is an earth sign, and Virgo is also an earth sign. Taurus may sextile Pisces, which is a water sign, but its first affiliation, its first alliance is going to be to another earth sign. So the question that you might need to ask yourself is not so much like, what happened to my love life? What happened to my creativity? What happened to my joy? And sort of sitting there under a gloomy cloud and suffering from a bout of existential paralysis. What you need to do is key into Virgo energy and sort of ask yourself, what would a Virgo do in a situation like this? Would a Virgo lament? Would a Virgo say, I miss these things? Would a Virgo sort of be their arms akimbo and say, well, what is life going to do for me? No. A Virgo is not going to leave this to outside forces. A Virgo is going to ask itself, and the Virgo moon will ask you, Taurus, what are you going to do about your love life? What are you going to do about your creativity? What are you going to do about your joy? Okay. You're the person who's responsible for making those things happen in your life. And how have you been taking care of that lately? Taurus, we know, is a very hard worker. Taurus sort of delights in working hard and also playing hard. And you may be in a situation in your life where you're working a lot more than you're playing, where work has become more of a priority for you. So the real question is, what are you going to do to grow and nurture your love life? What are you going to do to grow and nurture your creativity? What are you going to do to grow and nurture your joy? These are things that aren't sliding away from your life. These are things that you can take care of. And what I always like to return to when I talk to Taurus is the idea of gardening, whether you have a garden or whether you have houseplants. These are things that grow on your property, or maybe it's in a community garden, or they grow in a pot in your house, in which it's up to you to take care of this life. It's up to you to cultivate this energy. It's up to you to nurture this choice and to take care of it. The first thing we could probably begin with is, have you made time for this? Have you created time in your busy day or your schedule to take care of these things that give you joy, these things that give you pleasure? And now that you're sort of focusing into the moon in Virgo energy, what you can start to do is move your focus away from phantasmal regrets and longing, and you can put your focus on to-do steps, which is what Virgo is all about. Okay, a Virgo doesn't get lost at sea with regrets and longing. What it does is that it sits down and makes up a to-do list. All right. Now, what you can do is simply make a list of those things and how you want to go about achieving them. And the more you can make that a part of your day-to-day life, the more it's going to materialize in your life. What I would advise is to begin with making time for your love life, making time for your creativity, making time for your joy. If you make a place for that in your workaday world, then you will see that not only will it grow, but it will thrive. If you're born into the zodiac sign of Gemini, or you have Gemini rising, your big concern during this lunar eclipse on March 14th is going to be sustainability. The question is, can you sustain the life that you are living? Can you sustain the pace that things are happening and the energy that you have to put out there? In 2024, Jupiter, the planet of good fortune, entered your zodiac sign, and so you would have seen an increase in good fortune, an increase in finances, things turning out in favor of you. But with this kind of increase also come demands on your time, demands on your energy, and demands on your focus. And you might have found yourself in a position recently where you are racing to keep up with all of these developments that are unfolding in your life. And these are probably, for the most part, positive developments. And so you want to keep the momentum, you want to keep that thing going, but you're also a human being. And what's being demanded of you may be more than you can really give right now. Now, right now, you may not feel very supported in what it is that you're doing. You may not feel very nurtured. You may not even feel very at home with the home you live in or at home with who you are. The big question for this lunar eclipse is, what is your relationship to downtime? All right. Now, that might sound a little silly, like, what's your relationship to downtime? You might be like, what downtime? I'm constantly on the go. And that might be the reason why we're asking the question. Geminis are air signs, okay? And what air does is that it circulates, it circulates in the atmosphere. It's constantly in movement. And this explains some of the restlessness that Geminis can experience and feel in their life. When you have a planet like Jupiter moving through your zodiac sign, Jupiter brings a lot of larger-than-life developments and a lot of larger-than-life developments that require your attention and your focus and your being able to take care of these things. But you can't do it 24/7. You can't do it all the time. And so what can happen with Gemini is that you get caught up in the pace, you get caught up in the momentum, and being an air sign, you don't necessarily have the strongest relationship to your physical being, to your body. The reason is that air is about the intellect, it's about the mind. The mind can race and even enjoys racing, but the mind is housed in a body. Bodies are ruled by the element of earth. Earth signs know that, okay, that's the end of the day, and so I unplug and I unwind and that's it, and I'll see you tomorrow, after I've had a good rest and a good relaxation. But air signs, the mind can keep on going. The mind can keep on racing. There can be a feeling like I have to keep going at this pace, this momentum. And so what you need to understand during this period of time is that your mind is housed in a body. And so that might mean taking care of your body and also taking care of where your body is housed. You need to develop a healthier relationship to your downtime. You need to develop a healthier relationship to unplugging, to unwinding, to relaxing. And that's not going to be something that you can do easily at first, but it's something that you should start to practice in stages. And the sooner that you can do this, the sooner it's going to become more organic to your day-to-day life and your workaday world. Because the fact of the matter is, if you don't develop a better, healthier relationship to winding down and to relaxing, you do risk burnout. And that would make it even more difficult to keep up with the things that you're trying to keep up with. What you also want to bring here is a little bit more of command. You have Jupiter in your zodiac sign right now, after all. And so you can basically say that you're going to only work up to a certain amount of time and that things end when they end. If you refuse to pick up the phone, if you refuse to answer, then people have to work with your timetable. And you're not always at the beck and call of their timetable. So put your confidence in this. Say, that's the end of my workday, and we can talk at a later time. Not only does that give you the command and the authority, but it signals to other people that they're going to have to work with your timetable rather than you having to work with them. Now, at first, they might make you feel a little guilty, or they might, continue to throw all these demands. But the more that you stand by your timetable, the more that they will respect it. Because let's face it, you're the one who's indispensable here, and they need you in order for things to keep going, which in the end gives you the final word. If you're born under Cancer, or you have Cancer rising, this lunar eclipse is going to impact you powerfully. Now, it can be said that all lunar eclipses impact you powerfully, and that's because your ruling planet is the moon, and the moon is involved in any of the eclipses. So what's going to happen with this lunar eclipse taking place in the zodiac sign of Virgo on March 14th? For some time now, you've been feeling increasingly out of step with the people in your life. And it's been hard for you to sort of figure out, is it because you've moved on? Or is it because they have? So in other words, have you sort of outgrown certain relationships, certain friendships, certain associations in your life? Or do you feel like you're racing to keep up with new friendships, with new associations, with new relationships? What happens during this period of time, particularly with a lunar eclipse in a Mercury-ruled sign, is that you can feel betwixt and between. You're kind of like in transition between these two places. You started out from here and you were heading towards there and you got lost. You began to meander. All these roads showed up and these different turnoffs, and you've lost all sense of direction. And this is what can happen during a lunar eclipse, which also increases the lights out feeling as well. Now, you know that you're leaving behind old things. That could be old associations, old friendships, but it can also mean old habits, old routines, and even old priorities. But because an eclipse always throws a shadow over things, you're not very clear on what comes next. The future may feel to you like a big question mark. It may feel like you have this enormous empty canvas in front of you, and you have no idea of what's supposed to go on it. This is something that many painters face when they're beginning on a new work, or writers face when they're looking at an empty page. There could be like, oh my goodness, that's a real empty page. I don't know what I'm going to put on it. So the future is very open to you right now. It's very open and it's very inviting. But it can also feel very overwhelming. Like, where do I go with this? I have all of these possibilities, all of these potential places, all of these things that I want to do, but it's hard for me to prioritize. It's hard for me to articulate what it is that I want. It's hard for me to figure out, am I coming or going with this sort of thing? So what you want to do during this period of time is lean into the moon in Virgo. The great gift of Virgo is in its ability to focus on the details. All right. You can be looking at a big canvas You can be wondering what you're going to put on it. So maybe what you want to do is go and focus on the paints. You want to focus on the preparation of the paints. Maybe you want to go and examine the sketches that you did for this painting and see how you envisioned your vision coming to be. What Virgo does is that it maps things out, which makes perfect sense because its ruling planet is Mercury, and Mercury is the patron planet of guides. So get into the headspace of mapping out the things that you want to do. And suddenly that overwhelming picture, which might have left you paralyzed because it's so larger than life, becomes very doable. Go ahead and work out those steps, those easy to follow steps. Set them up in such a way that you can go from one to another, and you will find that you really can get to there from here. Now, if you're born under the zodiac sign of Leo, or you have Leo rising, the lunar eclipse in Virgo on March 14th is going to impact your finances. Now, before you freak out, a case can be made that you've been living inside a box for too long. Maybe it's an underpaying job. Maybe it's doing the same old, or a feeling that you're beholden financially to someone who has more money than you do. In other words, you've been penned in. Maybe it's as a result of circumstances, certain demands, maybe even setbacks, rough times that you've gone through. Now, what's going on here with the lunar eclipse in Virgo is that it's casting a shadow on all of these things, and suddenly a situation that you've accepted for perhaps longer than you should have is going to become increasingly more unacceptable. In other words, you're going to realize that you are not getting paid enough for what it is you do, that you're not being recognized for what you bring to the table, and that you want something different. Now, during a period of time like this, one has a tendency to align with either the sun or the moon in a lunar eclipse. Now, with you, you're always going to align with the sun. In fact, because the sun is your ruling planet, you're always going to respond very powerfully to any sort of eclipse, whether it's a solar eclipse or a lunar eclipse. It's not unlike Mercury-ruled signs, people born under Gemini and Virgo responding very powerfully to whenever Mercury turns retrograde in the sky. This is the same thing that happens when you're going through an eclipse. But what's going on here is that your sun is in the zodiac sign of Pisces. Pisces is not a zodiac sign that you really kind of understand naturally. There are things that Leo and Pisces have in common, like love, okay, for instance, like romance, like art and creativity. But Pisces has a very different take on things than Leo does. Pisces' feeling of love can be more global, it can be more self-sacrificing, and Leo's feeling of love is that it really wants that special partner, it really wants that special mate. Okay, so we're both talking about love. Both signs have a lot to do with love, but they have two very different points of view or two very different takes on love. The other thing that might make you uncomfortable about this Pisces energy that's coming into your life is the popular notion that Pisces has a difficult time with money. Okay, and yeah, that's true to an extent, but let's just say that Pisces has a very magical relationship to money, that it manifests at the times that it needs it. In any case, that's not your view of money, and that's not your view of security. You're a fixed sign, and you want to know that everything is signed, sealed, and delivered, particularly when it comes to finances. But as I said before, what's happened recently is that your financial vision of yourself, your sense of value, your sense of self-worth has become more and more narrow. And what you really do need here is the expansiveness of Pisces. You need the expansiveness of those oceans that cover 3/4 of this planet. What Pisces has right now, and that you may feel like you don't have right now, is the freedom to dream. And you need to get back in touch with that imagination of yours, with all of its hopes and fantasies and aspirations. You need to let your imagination and your courage to follow your imagination, your courage to follow your dreams. You need to let this lead you rather than your money anxieties. What's happened is that you put the cart before the horse. You put your financial anxieties and obligations in front of the horse, and so the horse can't move forward, and you're kind of stuck. What's going on here with this particular lunar eclipse on March 14th is that you're going to put the horse back in front of the cart where it belongs. Once you do this, you'll find that you won't be stuck anymore and that you'll actually get somewhere. If you're born under the astrological sign of Virgo, or you have Virgo rising, you may feel emotionally invisible right now. And that's because the moon is eclipsed in the zodiac sign of Virgo. The moon is eclipsed in your own zodiac sign. This is bound to make you feel like your feelings don't matter. You're not clear on what you want. And that maybe you're saying yes to things just because you don't know what else to say. Being in the dark is all part of the lunar eclipse. And this is what makes the difference between a lunar eclipse and a full moon. Lunar eclipses take place during a full moon, but typically with the full moon, the moon being full lights your way in the night. The moon being full lights your way in the dark. But when that full moon is eclipsed, then everything is thrown into darkness. There is no light to light the way. So if being in the dark is all part of a lunar eclipse, the best thing to do is to let your eyes adjust to the darkness. Get used to taking steps forward instead of strides. Get used to feeling your way on a path, even if the path is very familiar to you. And also get used to sitting with more questions than answers. Virgo is ruled by the planet Mercury, and Mercury is the planet of the mind. You're accustomed to working out a problem, to figuring out where something went wrong, to putting together those famous action steps and mapping out how you're going to deal with a situation. These faculties have been thrown into the dark, okay? You can't pull on them in the way that you used to pull on them. So when you're letting your eyes adjust to the dark, what's also happening is that you're getting in touch with your instincts, okay? And whenever we're talking about instincts, we're talking about the moon, okay? So if you let yourself get in touch with your instincts, if you follow what they have to say, if you let yourself sort of fumble your way in the darkness, if you let yourself be receptive to what other people have to say or the circumstances that are materializing in your life right now, you're going to be able to find your way. Now, it may not appear in a hard, fast rule. It may not be a formula that you can use from now on. It may not be a new way of living or a type of approach to something. You're finding your way in the dark. That's the whole point, is to throw you back on your resources and on faculties that you're not accustomed to using. So when you let yourself follow the lead of other things, like your instincts or your feelings about something, there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, you may find like it's a truer guide right now, a truer guide, especially because you don't know your own way. What also happens during a lunar eclipse like this is that lunar eclipses can bring the unraveling of things that had bound you, that had held you in place. And you may feel with the unraveling of certain commitments or obligations or responsibilities that you can get a sense of yourself again, of what you want again, and of where you want to go. So when the shadow lifts, when the lights come back on again, like they will in the next couple of weeks, you will once again feel emotionally seen, recognized, appreciated. But you'll also carry with you this experience, this confidence that if you should ever lose your way again, that you can always find it again. And what that gives you is a confidence to trust in your inner gyroscope should you ever be thrown off course again. If you're born under Libra, or you have Libra rising, the past 6 months have been very profound for you. In the past 6 months, you would have seen the things that used to define you falling away. These might have been roles that you cast yourself in that have lost all meaning and have lost all relevance for you. So, where does that leave you now? Well, where it leaves you is in a very humble and a very open-minded place. Right now, you might be the only person in your life who knows that you don't belong where you find yourself. And that's all right. It's something that maybe you had brought up before in conversation, maybe in musings or floating out an idea or something along those lines. And loved ones may have poo-pooed it. They might have said, oh, you're silly to think this, or you're wonderful, or you're the perfect spouse, or you're really great at your job. They would have reinforced these roles that you used to play. And so then you might have kept those thoughts or your reservations to yourself. And what about friends? What if you tried confiding in them your feelings of alienation or feeling apart from things? Friends might have been sympathetic or even supportive at first, but eventually, if you really listened to their advice, they would have tried to lead you back to the very lifestyle that you're trying to get away from. And that's because friends have a vested interest in you staying who you are. And who you are to them, of course, is their friend. So this feeling of not belonging where you find yourself right now, this could have felt very lonely and even a bit melancholic, because you want to reach out to people, but not only do you feel like they're not getting you, they may actually be actively not getting you because they want to reinforce what's familiar. And that's not where you are right now. You're feeling like what's familiar is too constraining. What's familiar is almost like a prison. It's inhibiting you. Or you've gone through too many things in the last 6 months to feel like you can pick up and embrace these things again. What you're going to find during this period of time when there is a lunar eclipse in the zodiac sign of Virgo, what you're going to find, or maybe what you're going to hear, is that the prison door has squeaked open, okay? You don't know how it squeaked open. You don't know if someone meant to open the prison door or not, whether there's a jailbreak that's underway, or whether someone just simply forgot to lock it. But you can sense that there's an opening. You can sense that there's an escape from where you are right now. Maybe it's an opportunity or it's an invite. Maybe it's just a sense that if you're going to make changes in your life or change the course of your life, you better do it right now. So basically what the stars are doing is that they're giving you a way out of the corner that you find yourself in. They're giving you a way out of what has felt like a prison or even an exile. And the way out isn't to return to what doesn't make sense to you anymore. The way out is to move forward with your life. Now, again, this can feel very alienating and this can feel very lonely. Now, some of you Libras may feel like you have to leave a relationship in order to be free, or that you have to leave a job, or that you have to throw off the role that you've been cast in, that it has to be something that's absolutely do or die, something that's absolutely definitive. You may feel like you have to do that. But the lunar eclipse happens to be forming a sextile and a trine to the planet Uranus in the zodiac sign of Taurus. The moon, which is being eclipsed, forms a trine to Taurus, and the sun in Pisces forms a sextile. So what it's suggesting is that there's an in-between way, that you don't have to do something that's that extreme if you don't want to. What it begins with and what it has to end with is that the decision is up to you as to how you want to proceed. You're going to feel this way out of your situation. It's not going to be articulate or visible yet because lunar eclipses tend to throw us all into the dark. And so what you're going to have to do is follow your instinct. You're going to have to follow your gut feeling. Now, being a Libra or Libra rising, you may feel like the only way you can leave this prison, this limbo, this no man's land where you find yourself is by an invitation or an opportunity or something materializing out of nowhere, something that shows you where to go. Or you may feel, being a Libra or a Libra rising, that the only way to leave this situation is by doing something extreme, to break up the relationship, to leave the job, to throw off the role that you've been cast in. And these may, in fact, be true, but the generator of this is your decision. You have to be the person who decides to leave the prison. Okay. Part of you may feel like this prison door has been left open and it's a trick. So what I'm going to do is close it. And so you go back to, the prison that you know. Or part of you may feel like this is the time to move on. This is the time to do something different. This is the time to follow my instinct, to follow my gut on the matter. All of this is going to result in an action that you may find both surprising and inevitable. When we experience the last solar eclipse in Aries, your opposite sign, on March 29th. If you're born under Scorpio or you have Scorpio rising, this lunar eclipse on March 14th is going to be a purging time for you. There are a lot of powerful emotions that are coming to the surface these days, which is saying something. Scorpios are used to living in a very powerfully emotional and even turbulent climate. But right now, it almost feels like they're gurgling up from some forgotten corner of your own psyche. So there are a lot of powerful emotions that are coming to the surface, a lot of emotions that you don't feel like stopping or moderating or trying to control. In fact, you probably want to give them permission to go wherever they're going to go. So this emotional energy is going to purge your life. It's going to clear away the old responsibilities and obligations. And it's also going to clear away the old hopes and wishes that have held you hostage. Now, that's an interesting idea. Old hopes and wishes that have held you hostage. What I mean by that description is sometimes we can pin our hopes on things. We can have expectations that we become very emotionally invested in, that even if they don't work out, we still insist that they should work out. We're still going to stand by them. We still want them to turn out in the way that we envisioned them. What happens during a lunar eclipse is that a lunar eclipse will cause the unwinding of something that's not on solid ground. Let's say it's a situation that you wanted to work out and you find that it's not working out, but you held on to it anyway. During the period of time of a lunar eclipse, that will fall apart. It will lose its solvency for you. It won't hold together. The bottom of the bucket will drop out. And this is done in order to clear away the dead wood and to make room for something new that's coming into your life, which is exactly what's going on with this lunar eclipse. So those hopes and wishes that didn't work out, but you stubbornly would not give up on, that held you hostage, that held your vision of the future hostage, that kept you in one place when you could have explored something else, they will all be wiped out during this time. What's also going to be cleared away are those old responsibilities and obligations, those feelings that you have to be financially or emotionally beholden to someone. No more indentured servitude for you. No more, working hard to impress someone who can't be impressed. or waiting outside closed doors with no one on the other side. People are either going to recognize and appreciate your merits right now in your life, or you're going to move on. No more manufactured excuses, no more second chances. There's this feeling that you've paid your dues, you're done with it. And people are either going to appreciate this or they're not. What you're also going to feel during this period of time, because of where the lunar eclipse is taking place, is that you need a lot of love and attention right now. Now, this is always a bit of a dicey proposition with a Scorpio. Scorpios love powerfully, they love deeply, they love profoundly. But the idea of need, that's something that they're not comfortable expressing. That's because Scorpio is a Mars-ruled sign. The Mars-ruled signs are Aries and Scorpio, and neither sign is comfortable with expressing need. Need for a Mars-ruled sign is always equivalent to weakness and to vulnerability. And so being a Scorpio, you're always very careful about covering up where your vulnerabilities are, where your needs are. But right now, as a result of this lunar eclipse, you need a lot of love. You need a lot of attention. And you need to say it. You need to say it in an open, vulnerable way. It shouldn't come out as something angry or retaliatory. It shouldn't come out as a guilt trip. It shouldn't come out as a grievance that you're unloading on someone. You simply need love and attention now, and you shouldn't apologize for it. That message, by the way, should stay with you and not the other person, okay? I don't want you going to someone and saying, I want a lot of love and attention, and I shouldn't have to apologize for it. Damn it. Okay, that's not the way, that's not what's going on right now. What's going on right now is this very powerful feelings for the need of love and attention, and that you shouldn't apologize for it. What you need to do is be open and honest about it, because your relationships and associations are in flux. Your relationships and associations are changing. You may lose some friendships and associations as a result of this very powerful and purging lunar eclipse in the zodiac sign of Virgo. But what you will get instead is that you will attract into your life like-minded people and like-hearted people, people who truly get where you are. These will be the people who respond to the energy that you're putting out right now. And these are going to plant the seeds for much more fulfilling friendships, associations, and perhaps even relationships. If you're born under Sagittarius, or you have Sagittarius rising, you're standing at a crossroads. Demands at home, or at least demands in your personal life, are impeding on your working life. But you need to answer these. You need to answer people who need you right now. Now, this might require taking time off, or it might even require a leave of absence. And it's going to be hard. This is going to be hard because you feel like so many things are on the brink of happening at work or in your career. And this is one of those times when you really cannot get away. But this is also one of those times when it's good to remember what zodiac signs are releasing their energies during this particular lunar eclipse. On one hand, we have the sun in the zodiac sign of Pisces, and Pisces is a Jupiter-ruled sign. On the other hand, we have the moon in the zodiac sign of Virgo, and Virgo is a Mercury-ruled sign. What's good about this is remembering that Jupiter signs like Pisces and your own, Sagittarius, tend to globalize, while Mercury-ruled signs like Virgo and its sibling sign Gemini tend to particularize. Now, what I would advise doing in this instance is siding with the Virgo moon. Now, that's not going to be really easy for you to do. First of all, Virgo forms a square to Sagittarius, so it's already a sort of challenging perspective of things. It's a challenging sort of energy for you. Virgos have a tendency to think small, and you like to think big and in grand sweeping gestures. The other problem that you're going to have as a result of the lunar eclipse is that the Virgo moon is in shadow. It's being eclipsed. It's not seen. So it's going to really be hard for you to trust that this is the way to go. You don't see how it could be an answer or anything coming out of a Virgoan energy that's going to be helpful or constructive for you. And you're going to feel very much like, I need to go with Pisces. I need to go back home or attend to personal matters. And if I have to take a hit or lose out at work, then that's the cost. That's not the way it has to be. If you get into the Virgoan mindset, which is to take a big picture and to focus on the details, to take an unknown territory and look for landmarks so you can map it out. If you let yourself get into that Virgoan mindset, then you'll find that actually it doesn't have to be an either or dilemma that you're faced, that actually you can start to negotiate between the people who need you in your personal life and the people who need you at work so that you can find a compromise. You can find a bridge between the two of them so that you're not walking out completely on your responsibilities, nor are you ignoring your obligations that you have to people in your personal life. There is a middle way, and there's a middle way that you can find and establish for yourself once you sort of step away from that bigger picture and start focusing on to-do steps. How if you were to do this and do that, how if you were to ask for this or that or request this or that, all of a sudden something that seemed overwhelming becomes infinitely manageable and may very well lead you to the result. And the result would be the best of both worlds. One of the plus points to accessing Virgo moon energy is that it knows how to juggle its responsibilities. Now, you can expect to do a lot of running back and forth between the two situations, but Virgos often can find a way of being there for both sides in varying degrees. The result is that you wind up honoring both masters without losing yourself in the process. Now, if you're born into Capricorn or you're Capricorn rising, you're going to feel a lot like you're about to take a big step. But because a lunar eclipse throws everything into darkness, you can't really tell where that step is. Is it a step up in the world, or is it a step off a ledge, for instance? So you're very cautious about how you're moving forward. Now, for a while now, for at least the last 6 months, it's felt like you've lost your way, that you're meandering, and that isn't really the worst thing. A while back, you realized that you needed to reinvent what it is that you do. Maybe not what it is that you do, but you needed to reinvent how you go about doing the things that you do. That might be a better way of putting it. Formulas and routines just weren't cutting it for you anymore. Either they were holding you back, or they were ineffective, or they just felt irrelevant to what life was demanding of you right now. And what happened during the last 6 months is that you've sort of let yourself wander a bit, meander a bit, maybe experiment, maybe explore. And during this period of time, it's been less results oriented for you and more about really kind of finding approaches that really said something to you, that felt like a good way of addressing situations or a good way of taking on work or a good way of producing results. But these have been kind of in the testing mode. They haven't been online, so to speak. They're things that you've been doing privately or by yourself, or maybe with a group of close associates. And what's happened as a result is you've been able to sort of test different things. You've been able to see whether this approach is effective or not. You've been able to change procedures or routines or your regimen, perhaps. And you've come to a place where you feel good about this. But the thing is, this is what's gone on personally. As I said, it's been offline. It's, I don't know, maybe they call it beta testing or something like that. But it's something that you've been able to prepare offline without having to put it out there in the world. What this lunar eclipse in Virgo on March 14th is going to signal is that it's time to put these forward. It's time to go with that procedure. It's time to go with that formula. It's time to go with that practice. Okay. And that you're going to invest in it fully. Now, this can be anxiety producing, obviously, because what if what you've been perfecting falls flat on its face? What if it's incapable of keeping up with things? What if it changes your brand or the way that you're seen by other people in such a way that they leave in droves? Something along those lines. So there's sort of a debut quality to this lunar eclipse in Virgo, because what it's doing is that it's saying it's time to put it out there. No more testing, no more prepping. It's time to put it out there, and that you need to be completely behind it. What you're going to find is that as this lunar eclipse releases you from old thought patterns, from old expectations, from old priorities, and you're going to find that you're more ready than you know. That if anything, maybe you've been over preparing and you have to strip away some of those things. But this lunar eclipse is about the unraveling of old obligations and old responsibilities and old points of view, so that what it does is releases you. It releases you back into the wild, so to speak, like an animal being released into the wild. It releases you. And what you're going to find is that your instincts know where to go, that you know exactly where to go. It's kind of like that moment. I don't know if you ever watch any of those nature channels where birds are, leaving the nest for the first time. I mean, we're given this idea that it's time to leave the nest and the overgrown bird is being pushed out of the nest. No, it's more like the bird sort of like goes and looks over the side of the nest and it throws itself out of the nest. I mean, these are at least ducks and geese. They sort of throw themselves outside the nest and they drop and they bounce because they're down, their fluff, cushions them. That's what it's like. It's not so much that you're leaving the nest, that you're dropping out of the nest, which is what this lunar eclipse is all about. And what you're going to find is two things. A, that there's enough fluff and down to support you, to protect you from being dashed on the rocks below or the ground below, that you'll land very softly. And B, that you're actually getting ready to fly, that you're ready to go on your own way. And this won't be so much a cathartic experience as it will be a gradual experience, something that you will feel for yourself over the next few weeks to come. If you're born into Aquarius, or you have Aquarius rising, you're more accustomed to thinking along the lines of what you owe, particularly what you owe others financially. What's going to happen as a result of this lunar eclipse in Virgo on March 14th is that it's going to flip things around so that the question becomes, what are you owed? Not only financially, but also emotionally, also time and energy wise. You're always investing time and energy in other people. What do other people owe you in terms of their time and their energy investment? And also physically, like, have you taken care of yourself, or have you always been putting this energy out into the world? Self-sacrifice is something that comes rather naturally for Aquarians, and self-sacrifice is great for in the moment. But self-sacrifice is not meant to be a lifestyle choice. You can no longer afford to give in the capacity that you've been giving. Now, some people might say, oh, well, this is about putting down boundaries, just learning how to say no and not giving in and things like that. That's not really the way an Aquarius sees the world. Aquarians understand that everyone has a part to play in the greater ecosystem, for lack of a better word, that everyone has a role to play and that it's important to be there and to show up. So this is something that really drives you more than anything. You don't choose to be self-sacrificing because you're feeling noble or anything along those lines. I mean, Aquarians do have a very noble side to them, but the self-sacrifice comes more from always putting out energy. Your mind is always at work. It's always asking questions of like what more you could do. And you also often feel like because you're able to do more, you see yourself as being able to do more than other people, that it's up to you to shoulder the burden. Remember that the traditional ruler of Aquarius is Saturn, a planet that is intimately familiar with things like heavy burdens and obligations and tasks that need to be fulfilled that only you can do and nobody else can do. So this isn't really about learning to say no or guarding your energies. What it is asking for people to pay back to you. In other words, if you've invested a lot of time and energy in someone, it's not unreasonable to ask someone to respond by putting time and energy into you. If you spent money on someone, it's not unreasonable to ask them to repay a loan or debt. If you have opened doors for someone, it's not unreasonable to ask if someone might be able to open a door or do a favor for you. It's all about prioritizing yourself. Now, you may have a couple of bad reactions to what I've just shared with you. First of all, Aquarians have a great difficulty with prioritizing themselves. Their automatic inclination is to care about other people and how they're doing. And that's because Aquarius buys into the maxim that the good of the many outweighs the good of the few. So it really believes that everyone should benefit from something. And so Aquarians have a hard time seeing themselves as a priority. This is when you need to remember that you're a person, okay? And that if you're going to say that, the good of the many outweighs the good of the few, guess what? The good of the many includes you. But that's not going to happen unless you signal that you're a person and that you have certain wants or needs, or you could use some help or support here. If you continue to always express yourself as being able to take care of yourself, no one's going to come and help you. And those you've helped out aren't going to feel like they have to repay it because it looks like you're doing fine. So as a result of this lunar eclipse, it's time to signal that you need debts to be repaid, favors to be returned. That brings up another quality that in Aquarius you might find very uncomfortable, and that is transactional. Okay. If you were a Mercury ruled air sign like Gemini, a Gemini would have no problem with transactional. That's because Mercury rules over buying and selling. You help someone out, someone helps you out. You sell someone this, you buy something from that person maybe later on. Everything is transactional. Aquarians have a tendency to see transactional as being beneath them. Okay, that's because Aquarius's modern ruler is Uranus. Uranus gets its name from Uranus, which was the heavenly night, the starry night. Uranus was a planet named after God that was represented by all the stars in the heavens. It had no statue, it had no church, it had no house of worship, it had no depiction, because you went out and beheld all the stars at night, and that was the majesty of Uranus. That was the majesty of the heavenly night. So Aquarians can be a little starry-eyed when it comes to how they show up for people. They wouldn't do anything like ask for something to be returned or something along those lines. But reciprocity is really important. And so there needs to be, during this period, a rebalancing of the give and take that happens in your life, because you are not an endless resource. You are not something that can't be depleted. You are an Aquarius that's housed in a body. Air signs, Aquarius, Libra, and Gemini, have difficulty with body issues because the body is ruled by the element of earth. And so a body they regard as being bound or being maybe even imprisoned at times, So the Geminis, the Libras, and the Aquarians really buy into the mind over matter because air is an element that rules over the mind. And they feel like it's mind over matter. Like my mind can transcend my body. I can keep working mentally even if my body is lying in a collapsed heap. What happens in regular day-to-day life is that the mind with an Aquarius has a hard time turning off. And so this can also explain things like bouts of insomnia and things like that. That that inability to understand that you need things like a body needs to be fed, a body needs to drink, a body needs to sleep and restore. These are things that are very important. And so this is why it's important for you to start prioritizing yourself. But prioritizing self, as far as an Aquarius is concerned, is really abstract. It's like, what, I put me first? That feels selfish and all about me, and that's nauseating. I mean, Aquarians really have a hard time with being self because it's associated with selfish. But if you see that everything in life is give and take, that air, we breathe in, we inhale only to exhale air, there's a give and take in that process. It won't be so hard for you to see that there's a give and take that takes place in your life and that you need to be getting more because you're being taken a lot right now. You don't need to draft a new rule or law or anything along those lines. Simply ask for something to be paid back. Simply ask for reciprocity and point out the things that you have done. And you'll find most people, if not all, being more than happy to respond and maybe even wondering what took you so long to ask in the first place. If you're born under Pisces or you have Pisces rising, you're probably finding yourself standing at a crossroads in your relationship. Lunar eclipses are different than solar eclipses. Solar eclipses always deal with a change of direction moving forward. Solar eclipses always look to the future. If you think about, for instance, driving down the highway and you're looking through the windshield, you're looking at the road ahead, that's a solar eclipse. Its focus is on the road ahead. A lunar eclipse, just to sort of build on that analogy, a lunar eclipse is like looking in the rearview mirror. You're looking in the rearview mirror to see what's going on behind you. Are there cars that are in the lane that you want to turn into? Or how much road have you covered? How far have you traveled? There is a reflective element to a lunar eclipse. And there's also kind of like watching your backside to the lunar eclipse as well. So with the solar eclipse, we're always looking forward, usually 1 to 2 years. This is when we can expect a dramatic change in direction in our lives. If the solar eclipse happens to be taking place in your sign, a lunar eclipse, you always want to look 6 months back. Okay. So if we're in the month of March, you want to look back to what was taking place in September for you. Now, what was taking place in September may have been the beginning of something relationship-wise for you. And that could be a romantic relationship. But because we're talking about the solar seventh here in the astrological chart, it could also be a business partnership or a creative collaboration. In any case, something was beginning 6 months ago that falls within this rubric. And so what you want to ask yourself is, has it gotten anywhere since, or has it just stayed stuck in a rut? Now, let's say 6 months ago, you fancied someone, and you looked across the plaza and you locked eyes and you fell in love with someone and now you're crushing on someone madly. All right. And maybe that took place 6 months ago. And maybe for 6 months you've been crushing, and maybe for 6 months you never learned the name of this person. You never got their email. You never had contact. You never even said a word. This is the time to let that go. All right. In other words, whatever the emotional investment or the fancy or the hope or the dream or the wish, it's time to let it go because it's had 6 months to sprout, to take root, to grow, and it hasn't. You've been waiting or yearning or longing. And what you need to do is to sort of bring this to an end, to rip out the cord, so to speak, to unplug the respirator of hope. You need to unplug it because it's blocking your way forward, perhaps, to finding someone who would be able to respond to the feelings that you have, who would find that a wonderful idea, who would love to get together with you because you've fancied someone else and your nourishing longing or yearning or hope blinded you and made you unavailable. So what a lunar eclipse says is, take a look at how that plant is doing. Does it look like it's still in the same place it was 6 months ago? Has it not grown or flowered or anything like that? And if it has, then chances are it died or it just never became anything. And so the lunar eclipse gives you permission, actually encourages you to get rid of this. You don't need to be carrying around this hope or wish that isn't bearing fruit, that isn't going anywhere. So this is the time to say, this isn't working. Romantically, if you feel like things have plateaued in your relationship or something, this is the time to say, I don't think this is working. Let's say it's a business partnership. You came together with someone, there's a lot of excitement and exhilaration and things just fell flat. And maybe the person's been there for you or not been there for you. And you've had to babysit this person or bird dog this person for 6 months. This is the time to let that business partnership go. It's not going to become anything. Or maybe if it's a creative collaboration, you two keep making times to get together and work on that book or script or song or something along those lines. And the person always bails or takes a rain check and doesn't show up. Or if they do show up, they're not really giving as much as you are. It's time to realize that maybe you were leaning on this person as a crutch, and that maybe you don't need this person and that maybe you can make your own way and that you would be happier making your own way. So a lunar eclipse is when something that hasn't really shown results, you let it go. And the stars are really encouraging you to do exactly that. No matter how much you want to say, oh, but if or wait or something could, it's time to let it go. Now, let's say that things did start out but they started out slowly, that maybe you had a good start, but then it kind of lingered or it plateaued, something like that. But then it's still kind of growing. And then it's still kind of growing. It shows signs of life, Then it's during the lunar eclipse that you want to reinvest energy in it, that you want to put more time and energy into this because maybe it had floundering first steps, it slipped on the rocks or something along those lines, but now it's kind of up and you really feel like it's going somewhere and it's showing signs of going somewhere. Maybe not in the way that you expected or other people would measure it, but it shows signs of it. This is the time to nurture. This is the time to put in the energy and to put in the focus because you're on the verge of things really beginning to bloom and to grow. And this would be in this period to probably about mid to late April, could actually be a very profound and very fulfilling period for you. So what if you're not in a relationship? What if the idea of a relationship or a business partnership or creative collaboration just doesn't make any sense to you? It's not a big deal. Then what this lunar eclipse is going to encourage you to do is to go outside your usual sphere of activity. In other words, there may be places that you go on a regular basis, people that you see on a regular basis. You have a routine, you have a set way of getting through your day. What this lunar eclipse is going to do is invite you to step outside of that comfort zone. This might happen through invitation. This might happen through hearing about an opening. This might happen through making a new acquaintance or making a new friend. Part of you may feel like, I'm good. I've got the things that I do. I do my orbit during the day. That's fine. I'm fine with that. But the lunar eclipse is going to say, try something new. Try something different. Because what's kind of happened here is that you've become a plant that's grown bigger than its pot, okay? And that you need transplanting. I don't know if you keep houseplants or anything or garden plants in pots, but you can tell when a plant isn't growing, that it's kind of stagnating, that the leaves are even sort of browning a bit, that it needs to be transplanted. It needs more room to spread out its roots, that it's feeling too cramped. It's feeling too bound up. And so this is what the lunar eclipse is going to give you an opportunity to do. Again, it may be through invites or opportunities or someone saying, hey, let's go to this art exhibit or something along those lines. I would encourage you to say yes. Okay. You need to get out and about again. You need to get off this typical circuit that you're on. And what happens in the lunar eclipse is that the moon in Virgo, which is really about your routines and your to-do lists and the way that you live your day-to-day life, the moon in Virgo is being eclipsed. It's disappearing as a light in the sky. And in this instance, it's removing those obligations, those chores, those tasks that have perhaps limited your vision or limited what you go out and do over a period of time. It removes that so that it's no longer there and that you are free to move about as you please. And this would be wonderful because it really sort of brings that Jupiterian energy into your life. You need to, as they say, get out more. You need to move about as you please. You need to re-engage the world in different ways than you typically engage in. And when you do this, not only do you find your horizons broadening, but you're going to find your interactions with people to be much more enriching and much more fulfilling. If you enjoyed what you saw, please press the like button. It helps more than you know. If you could subscribe, that would be wonderful. I've had such a wonderful time visiting with you this week, and I can't wait to get together next time on Christopher Renstrom Astrology.